ॐ निरञ्जनं नित्यम् अनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमिड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामः. Namaste everyone and welcome to our study of the Bhagavad Gita. We are studying chapter 13 of the and last week we had a look at verse 26. Today, and briefly touched on verse 27. Verses 27 and 28 are sometimes quoted by Swami Vivekananda in the complete works. When he quotes some of these verses, then we can say, they have some special meaning and significance in terms of the knowledge and its application, practicalization of that, because he paid a lot of attention to practical Vedanta. Vedanta made applied in our everyday life to spiritualize our everyday life. So let's have a look at this particular verse. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyastu avinashyantam ya pashyati sa pashyati. The word pashyati means to see, pashya. Ya means who, and sa means he. These are pronouns, personal pronouns in Sanskrit language. So, not everyone sees in a spiritual way. What is spiritual seeing that is being described here? Of course, we see with our senses, our eyes, forms, colors, shapes. We see through our mind also. So when people are discussing ideas, sometimes the response would be, yes, I see, or sometimes you find the speaker is inquiring, do you see, do you see? So that is seeing means understanding. Do you get it? Are you with me? Does it make sense? So that is called, you might say, intellectual or mental seeing. There's another type of seeing, we might say, through the eye of spiritual wisdom or the spiritual eye, which Sri Krishna describes as the Divya Chakshu. That eye is mostly closed in most people. Not mostly, almost everyone has got the spiritual eye closed because we are too busy working through these gross organs, the gross senses and the mind. It's only when we put these to rest and put them aside and direct that energy inwards so that the consciousness rises beyond the body where the physical senses reside, and the mind is quietened, that means all the thoughts are put to rest, then this mind becomes transformed into what is called intelligence or buddhi. And at that time, the spiritual eye opens, and through that eye, we see something or perceive, or more accurate word would be, we experience some higher degree of reality in which all the diversities disappear and we see the underlying unity behind the diversities. So it is like you go to the ocean and you see so many waves when you're standing on the beach, and you're just aware of the waves appearing, constantly changing. But if you get into the water and you're looking at the level of the waves now, so almost up to, say, standing up to the neck deep, and then you're seeing the waves, but sometimes the waves pass over your head and you see the water that is. And you realize that all the waves contain the same water, but you are also sometimes aware of the form and sometimes the water. And then if you dive under the water, you see only water and water, no forms there. So these are three perspectives of the same ocean. Your experience depends on where you are positioned. If you are outside it, then it's the world of duality. I am one, the world is the other. Aham, idam. And that's how we see the world through our senses, or experience the world through our senses. When we go to the intermediate region, then we see diversities, but now and then we also see underlying unity behind the diversities also. So you see the water and you see the waves. That means we see we get glimpses of the one behind the many. Both coexist. And when we go really deep into our own self, then all the forms disappear. Then only the permanent, unchanging ocean remains. So what are the differences? What's the difference between the waves and the ocean? The waves are constantly changing. They appear, they remain for a while, they disappear. As opposed to that, the ocean is the permanent entity. It doesn't appear and disappear, it is there all the time. Let's use that example to understand this verse. So, samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishthantam parameshwaram vinashyastu avinashyantam ya pashyati sapashyati. Spiritual seeing is like what? It's seeing the Parameshwaram, the Supreme Being. In our analogy, the Supreme Being is the ocean. Where is he? Equally present in all beings. Samam means equally. Not that it is in more in one and less the other. That means there's only one ocean, not that many oceans behind each wave. There's only one ocean. Sarveshu bhuteshu. Sarveshu bhute means in all living beings, all entities. Living and non-living. Also, let us say, it's also present in a stone, in a plant, in a worm, in a dog, a monkey, a man, and in gods. The same ocean is behind all these forms. These various entities that I just talked about are various names and forms superimposed. There are so many waves in the ocean. So, we are aware of the so many names and forms, but we are also aware of the underlying ocean behind those same names and forms. And what is the difference, discerning factor? Vinashyastu avinashyantam. Vinashyastu means that which is perishable, vinashi, that will perish, that means will decompose, it's mutable, it's changing. It wasn't there in the beginning, it came into being in time, remains for a while, and then it disappears also. So something like that is vinashyastu, means imperishable things. In things that are perishable, not imperishable. In things that are perishable means vinashyastu, among the perishable things. What is that entity? What are we trying to see behind the names and forms? That which is imperishable, which is the ocean. So all entities, all names and forms lie right from Lord Brahma to the smallest differentiated, inert, almost non-living being. They are these so many waves in that ocean of consciousness. They are perishable. They appear at the time of creation. They are absorbed into the supreme Maya, into the three gunas of Prakriti at the time of Pralaya. But that on which this appearance and disappearance happens, that is unchanging. It is like the screen in the cinema hall on which different movies are being played out. And you can have all the drama and the tragedy and the comedy and everything. There can be shooting and bloodshed during the movie, and the screen will look like red. But when the projector is switched off, we still have that same white pure screen, untouched by all the action that was happening. That is the imperishable ocean of consciousness, in which all changes, all beings appear and disappear. So, having that spiritual eye, ya pashyati sa pashyati, is that person, if a person has that spiritual eye, he or she is able to see, perceive or experience the imperishable Supreme Being, Parameshwaram, as the foundation, as the substratum, as the source of all names and forms that are there in our everyday experience. So that would be an enlightened way of seeing, spiritually awakened way of seeing. And that's what we are trying to do through our spiritual sadhana. That is actually an experience. Refer to the experience of Manmadhanath Ganguly. That's a wonderful illustration that gives you a deep insight. When his mind is at the sense-bound plane, he's sitting next to Swami Vivekananda on the bank of the Ganga, what does he see? He sees the trees and the plants and people and everyone. He's aware of all these diversities. He's not aware of that oneness behind the diversity. That is, the experience of Maya. And when, by the grace of his spiritual teacher, not so much through explanation, words that he was trying to use to explain, but by really changing or uplifting his mind to a higher spiritual plane, the experience of this disciple was that he saw everything vibrating. That means his mind was lifting to another higher plane of energy or plane of consciousness. And then suddenly everything disappeared from his perception. It is there for somebody else who probably is going around doing his things around there. To him, the world is there. But for this particular person, that had changed. So one important thing is always a subjective change for person. It doesn't happen for everyone. And then what does he describe? He said he felt a little bit of vibration in his own head or mind, and then suddenly everything disappeared, but it was replaced by an ocean of consciousness. Everywhere that consciousness is there. That is that ocean of consciousness, that is the foundation behind the whole universe, and at the highest level, that is called the infinite, Brahman, Prajnanam Brahma. It is of the nature of pure consciousness. And in that, all the diversities and differences disappear. The one of great form and personality of Swami Vivekananda and his own personality, there seem to be mere waves, coincidences in the wonderful ocean of consciousness. But when his mind came down, then all the diversities and the differences reappeared. And according to him, Swami Vivekananda said, this is Maya. Maya is a statement of fact. It's not some illusion. It's a statement of fact of what we experience depending at what station our mind is tuned to, at what plane of consciousness we are residing in. And so yoga, or all the spiritual sadhana, is really an attempt to unhinge and disconnect the anchoring of the mind to the gross world, and that is called vairagya or renunciation or dispassion, freeing those ropes that hold down the hot air balloon that is trying to rise through your tapasya and sadhana and meditation, because if you do not do that, the mind does not rise up, and let it elevate, rise to a higher plane. Then from there, the whole perspective and appearance of everything changes, and we reach that high heights where everything is merged into that oneness. That is called samadhi. Self-realization, God realization, and all that. And when we return from that, should we return from that? Normally a Jiva Koti does not return from that. He stays in that state for around 21 days, and then his body drops off like a dead leaf of a tree. But should there be a purpose to be served through that instrument of the body of the realized person by the divine, then they return to the human world again, and they're called, a special name is given to them, they're called Ishwar Kotis. And the difference is that they're always aware of that unity, that consciousness, themselves as the infinite supreme being, yet they can operate through the personality and the individuality of the Mr. So-and-so. And they would be the spiritual teachers. These are the real gurus, the awakened souls, not those people who simply have wonderful personality and all that without the realization. So, vinashyastu avinashyantam, yapashyati sapashyati. So, what do we take out of this verse? There are different ways of seeing. Just seeing through the eyes gives us the form and shape. That's very, very superficial. Seeing through ideas gives us some conceptualization, some understanding and all that. Yeah, and that can be right, can be wrong. One man can give some understanding, another one can come and totally confuse you and bamboozle you with some other logic. But the experience that you get through the opening of the spiritual eye is beyond any doubt. One of the characteristics of self-realization is that there won't be any doubts in your mind at all. There's in the Upanishads sutra verse, vidyate hridaya gantri Shuddhate sarva samshaya shiyante sarva karmani tasmin drishte paravare. If you see that supreme being, tasmin drishte paravare, which is pervading at the highest level and lower level also, what happens? Vidyate hridaya granthi. Hridaya granthi means the ego. Ego is, we have discussed, It's a junction between the Kshetra and Kshetrajna. When the light falls on a bowl of water and you see a reflection, that reflection happens when the beam of light hits the water, and that is called the reflected sun is the sense of ego. And what happens in self-realization, that knot that entangles the two together is totally separated. Hridaya Granthi. Granthi means the knot. Hridaya means the heart, the knot of the heart, which is the ego. Siddhate sarva samshaya. Samshaya means doubts. Sarva samshaya, all doubts are forever removed from the mind. Such a person cannot be deluded or bamboozled or confused by anything. So as I mentioned once, one Swami came to one of our presidents, Swami Bhuteshanji, and said, Maharaj, I think I'm not very sure whether I've attained Samadhi or not. I had some spiritual experience, but can you tell me? And the Swami asked him, do you ever get any doubts? And he said, yeah, sometimes. He said, then you haven't reached there yet. Because one of the characteristics of self-realization would be absolutely without any doubts. So, yapashyati sapashyati. That is the power of that self-realization. No doubts, absolutely, no ignorance. And what do we see? Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam paramesharam. So that is the highest experience. What value is it to us? Well, when you're studying in scripture like this, or when Sri Krishna is trying to present us a spiritual teaching through scripture, through ideas, through shastras, they're trying to open for us the eye of spiritual understanding, still at the mental level, still at the intellectual level, but this becomes a gateway. And this is like a stepping stone in the direction. So you remind yourself that, of course, externally I see so. For example, let us take an example. You go out in a crowd of people, you see so many people. Outside you see male, female, black, brown, white, different personalities, appearances, so many varieties are there. That's what your physical eyes are seeing. And then if you try to see through the eye of understanding, you say, they're all Kiwis. So we are all Kiwis, or we belong to the same group or something. So some underlying unity is there by which you identify yourself with them. But they're still out different there. But after reading this sloka Bhagavad Gita, you say, okay, there was some little teaching that I read, and now I'm going to try to see through the eye of spiritual understanding. And what will that be? I see all these forms. Apparently on the outside they're all different, but I also understand in my spiritual understanding that there is same consciousness present in all of them. The idea of this oneness comes. You find it has got a tremendous power in its application to remove so many little vices that come in our mind. No longer we hate others. No longer we can do harm to others. No longer we can cheat others. No longer we are judgmental for others, because the same being that is present in me is present out there. And in doing anything undesirable to them, harmful to them, would be doing harm to yourself. So certain actions are there which sort of reinforce this oneness with everyone. And those things are called the virtues or the doables in a spiritual life. Among the 10 commandments, do's are there. And these are like be kind to others, be compassionate to others, serve others, sacrifice to others. Through all of this, the underlying moral principle is the idea of asserting that oneness. I'm trying to integrate or bring that idea of oneness in my thought, word, and deed. And that becomes a spiritual practice. The more I feel for others, because really others are not others. They are the part of the same ocean, and I'm in them, they are in me, sort of thing. So then forgiveness, compassion, and all those things that you see in the lives of great teachers like Buddha, Christ, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, you will find that those sentiments become stronger in our and become the guiding factors in our life. But if that understanding is not there, then we just see the external, and then we are very, very opinionated, egotistic, judgmental, harmful, competitive, exploitive, and all the vices that you can think about comes when we are just unaware of the underlying reality and think that the waves are real, not knowing that the ocean is the reality. So this is the practical part of it, and that's why Swami Vivekananda would quote this in the in his lectures. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyastu avinashyantam yapashyati sapashyati. All right, any questions out there?
Namaste Swamiji. I had a question.
Yes.
So while we say that a realized soul, a realized person can come to the human sphere and with the sense of realization, deal with the everyday life, the world. A person who is not realized, who has not got the realization, and maybe he's doing sadhana or he's trying to sort of do the practices, how can that person in his everyday life keep up to that level, if not that level, to some level of understanding in that 24 hours that he lives every day?
All right, you have got a question. Anyone out there would like to respond to this? It's not a very difficult answer. Come on, somebody. Yeah.
Because the other person is ignorant or he's not aware of the things.
Yeah, we all are ignorant. You don't have the difference between an ordinary and unenlightened person is that he has a conceptual or intellectual understanding of it, like we will after the study of this, but it is not really an experience of it. Okay, but that is better than having no idea of it. And those who aspire for that highest realization would try to put that into practice. So in the commentary written by Acharya Shankara on the Bhagavad Gita, he says, so what's the utility of these teachings where so many things are talked about the qualities of a person who is realized? And he says, well, we try to practice as much as possible in our everyday life. So while the realized soul can see, and he doesn't have to imagine, he doesn't have to conceptualize, it's a real fact right in front of him, is his experience. But in the case of a sadhaka, he is mindful of that oneness behind there, and he's desirous of having that experience, and therefore he regulates his conduct and behavior to tune himself with the realization that he so desires. Okay. He will not, he understands some of the characteristics of that realization, and he'll say, I'll try to practice that. For example, okay, so you understand samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram. And how would that change your behavior and conduct? So if you are working as a salesperson or something in the shop or somewhere, customers come, if you want to apply this teaching, then you say, hey, that same divine on whom I have meditated in my heart today is present in front of me here in this particular form. And the moment that idea comes, you feel very good about it because, suddenly you have that the spiritual idea has surfaced in your mind. That is, all your studying at home and meditating is now coming in your everyday life. But it can change your behavior. Now, the other person, if he gets angry or says something, then you will not lose your balance so quickly. You will respond to that person with kindness and politeness. You will serve him with respect and all those type of things. See, already your behavior is so much changing. You are putting into practice that idea of oneness. Of course, the other person doesn't know that you're doing that, so, and so you can lose your balance if he gets angry or says something that is not so nice, and you suddenly forget that God is present in front of you and lose your cool. But that's the test of spiritual life. How good your meditation is not to be measured by, okay, how deep your concentration was and all that during a meditation, but how much you can carry the fragrance of that meditation out in your interactions with people and all those around you. And if you are sincere, you'll find that you'll be able to maintain that poise and balance. And that is itself is applying that teaching. It is slowly transforming. And if you are very sincere, do it day in, day out, year in, year out, through the practice of abhyasa yoga, one is able to establish oneself very easily in that perspective or approach or perception, and deal with people. Now and then you lose your footing and slip and get angry or reactive or whatever is there. But when you come back at home, you reflect and say, I should not have said that. That was a situation where I slipped and lost balance in my understanding. But next time you go, you're more vigilant and alert. In this way, Karma Yoga is very powerful because it gives you a very positive and direct feedback to you about where you stand in your spiritual journey. Otherwise, one can sit in a mountain cave and doing meditation, thinking that I have conquered all anger and this and that, and I am a very pure soul, noble soul. But when you come out in the battlefield of life, all those little things that are hiding deep in your mind, they all come and you are taken by surprise. It's for that purpose Swami Vivekananda brought about this wonderful harmony of karma, bhakti, jnana, and dhyana, and said, do your meditation in the silence of your heart. Go out in the field and see how long you can put that into practice. In the beginning, maybe once in a while that idea comes, most of the time you forget. But through repeated practice, one can strengthen that. Exercise is necessary. That's why I was very surprised when I was reading on these lectures. There are 4 lectures of Swami Vivekananda called Practical Vedanta. They were given, I think, in London. And in one of the lectures, I think, lecture number 4, somewhere I very much remember where on the page, in the top hand side of the right page, he says there, more than truth itself, we need the exercise. That was so much surprising. I say, why? Truth is the most wonderful thing. Why would somebody need something other than that? And then I realized that, look, these facts and truth is there as conceived, but without exercising, we cannot manifest them in our life. So that sadhana and going out in the field. Sadhana here does not mean what you do in the silence of your shrine. The world itself is the place of worship where every living being is the temple of the divine. And if one has that perspective, then one can transform every activity into a spiritual activity. Such is the wonderful transforming power of this Vedanta teaching. And so, yes, and if one is very sincere, day in, day out, he walks onto that. At some point, this veil that of names and forms that are there, they begin to peel away. They begin to get attenuated. They begin to get thin. And one fine day, the clouds vaporize and you see the direct sun. And that's the realization of it. So,
Thank you, Swamiji.
hmm?
Thank you. I think I really kind of can understand when you said every activity can be transformed into a spiritual activity. And I've also thought about that at times, but it's difficult.
Of course, it's difficult. What is easy? Huh? You're going in for completing a 5-year, 6-year degree. Is it harder than that? We are ready to put for so much more time and effort in that, and don't complain. A little bit of spiritual discipline, we make a big deal about it. The price is very high. The reward is very high. We should be ready to put the price to it also. Then you'll appreciate it. Anyone can climb a little hill, but if you want to climb the Mount Everest, then you have to really build up some solid stamina behind you, isn't it?
That's right.
But the joy of that conquest is something else, So, if it was so easy, then there would be all yogis walking around the streets in Newlyn,
They are, aren't they?
They are, I do not know, haven't met some. I'm just saying.
I was thinking today, when the mind, so somebody says something to you, and then you, usually there's no gap between what somebody says and how you receive it. There's no gap. And because there's no gap, you tend to just react or respond, whichever way, however you do it. But if you can create that gap, I was thinking that today, that if you can create that gap between when somebody says something to you and before it reaches that mind of yours. That gap, then it allows you to look and provide that pause. And that should, I was thinking that that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so you have to slow down your mind, and you find a lot of gaps are there between the thoughts also. In Kashmir Shrivism, they say between every thought. So one thought goes, and before new one starts, at the junction between the two, there's a very slight opening in which there is no thought. Okay, and you see that the underlying consciousness very briefly. Just most people don't notice it, but as your mind, your concentration becomes deeper and deeper and deeper in your mind, you will see that your thoughts become slower and slower and slower. That is one of the characteristics of a good concentration. You will see, normally when you're repeating the mantra, it just goes on mechanically. But as the concentration becomes faster, you will see that you are able to see the rise of the mantra, like Om, Bhur Bhuva Swaha, whatever. But everything is very slow. And as the concentration becomes more intense, the flow of the thoughts in your mind, it goes into like a slow motion. Okay, and a person who's very calm and concentrated and intense, their thoughts don't flow like in a rapid tempo. They are able to follow the flow and see what's happening. And because they have that slow motion, they can have a grip of it. For example, they say, okay, I'm getting angry, but I should not get angry, and I arrest, I step out or restrain myself. But another person, it happens so fast and he loses his cool before he realizes. And that is where there's a difference between people and people. It's all the quality of mind.
I just thought that this particular, and I tried to practice it today, it was quite amazing.
Very good. That's the way you have to test it out in the field. The other one is you go and set the platform. Okay, I sit in my office, I open the counter and said, okay, let me remind. I'm going to see every Tom, Dick and Harry who comes, and I will remind myself first thing, here comes the divine in this human form. So I'm on the alert, I'm on the guard. All right. That now you're interacting with that person, maybe you'll forget in there. In the middle, you try to remember. When he finishes, you might say, I served the customer, but he has served the divine, me in that form that came and went away. So there you're practicing. And people complain when we say ask them to practice this. Is, oh, Swamiji, you are saying it's so hard. Imagine somebody comes and does harm to you, it's a terrible guy, and you are asking me to see God in them. How can we do that type of thing? Yeah, it is difficult, but you can start with the good ones around, And you build your stamina, and so even the terrible one comes and you say, I know behind the mask of the terrible one remains the same divine person. So, yeah, step by step, practice. Verse 28, the 34 verses in this chapter, verse 28 is very similar, but from a practical application point of view, you'll see the first sentence, first half of the verse is similar to what was covered in 27. Samam pashyan iha sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram. Sarvatra means everywhere. Since Pashyan, of course, you see, seeing is there. Samam equally. Who is there? Ishwaram, the Supreme Being, the consciousness. Samavasthitam, samam avasthitam, present alike everywhere. Samam pashyan iha sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram. So this is a statement of fact, if a person is able to see in this way. Well, what happens thereafter? What's the consequences of putting that Vedanta glass of oneness, you might say, and say, behind all the colors is the same white light. All the colors are products of the same white light. Let me be mindful that the white light is the reality and the colors are the only manifestation of it. So, and I'm one of those colors out of the same being. I'm one of those waves out of the same ocean. And all these other waves are, brothers and sisters, you might say, sons of the same divine being, or my own, or me only in there, because really there's not much difference. the water inside one wave is really not different from the water in the other wave, only the forms are different. Somehow a sense of identity comes, a oneness comes. The other person is not really the other one. I am in them also, and they are in me also, that type of thing. So that type of deep understanding, and this is the test. Na hinasyati atmana atmanam. Hinasya means such a person does not do any injury to his own self by his own self. Because really the two are one. This is the rationale behind these teachings of what is moral and what is ethical. Why should we be nice to others? Why should I love my neighbor as myself? Why should I not do any injury to others? And so the rationale is, from the Vedanta perspective, is that really there's only one being. In doing injury to others, we do injury to ourselves only. And no one wants to do injury to themselves. But when we don't have that knowledge, then we do some injury to others and happily go about as if that was all right. And you might have some justification also. He did harm to me, so I did tit for tat type of thing, some type of thing, or self-defensive. But from the highest point of view, a person who is putting into practice this highest truth, they say, there's really no other there. It's only me in there. And so if somebody practices this, and don't argue that it's going to be very hard, yes, it's not easy, but at least intellectually we go about doing it. We can do things from a distance. We have to have a little bit of practicality about it. Yes, the Atman is present in me and in the tiger. That doesn't mean I go and embrace the tiger. I might have a philosophy and I might be a spiritual seeker, but the tiger doesn't know that. So he will not behave like his God. But I'm the sadhaka, and I will try to hold on to that idea, but from a distance. So Sri Ramakrishna gives the practical example. Yes, God is present in all, and he says, Daku Narayan, Chor Narayan, and all this. But Narayan is there, behind the Daku and the Chor. But you have to have that common sense to salute that Tiger Narayan and Daku Narayan from a distance. Don't close to them. So that is a little bit of this common sense, and practicality also has to be in our everyday life. And he gives a beautiful example. So he says there was a sadhu in a monastery, and the spiritual teacher was taking classes like this, and he was trying to teaching all his disciples, students, that same Narayana, same divine being dwells in the heart of all beings, and therefore you should be respectful for them, you should not do any harm to them, and all those type of things he taught to the students, and they listened with great attention and faith and trust. And then they were sent out into the forest, go and collect some firewood and all those for the sacrifice, and water, fruits, whatever. And as they were doing there, suddenly they had a shout, and somebody screamed out, "Hey, get out of the way, get out of the way. There's a mad elephant coming down this road. And so save yourself." Now this disciple, he thought, so my teacher said today, God is present in everyone. It's also present in the elephant, and therefore I don't have to worry because it's God there. And so he stood in the path and saluted and did namaskar and all that. And what happened? The elephant came and, the rogue elephant, picked him up and tossed him in some direction of the path and went on its way. And then the other disciples saw this happening. They all rushed to him and picked him up and took him to the ashrama. He was all knocked out, unconscious, and sprinkled some water on his face, and suddenly he opened his eyes. And then his teacher, they asked him, "We called out to you to get out of the way. Why didn't you call him? Do that." And he said, "Oh, didn't we study this morning? Our teacher was saying that God is present in everyone. So I was thinking that this God is present in this elephant, and therefore I didn't need to get out." And then the teacher says to him, "Yes, my child, I did tell you that God is present in him. But then the Mahout who was sitting on the elephant, he was calling you out to get out of the way. If that was that God calling you out, why didn't you listen to him also?" So here, through this application of this teaching, seeing the divine in all people and its practicality about how we should do in our everyday life is brought out. Yes, Intellectually, we understand this. In our highest realizations, also we'll experience this, but that is from the perspective of the sadhaka. The other party out there doesn't know, and they will behave in that ignorance, and in that ignorance they can do harm to you. So have what you call spiritual common sense about how we apply this. And so if one does this all the time from a distance, it brings a sort of a tremendous restraint and control in our behavior with others. We do not hurt anyone in our thought, in our word, in our deed. Ahimsa, non-violence, is one of the supreme virtues. Ahimsa paramo dharma is the supreme virtue. And himsa doesn't mean physical injury. Indeed, it can be done through words. You can say something that can be very, very hurtful to somebody. It's even worse than giving that person a slap. You have slept with that person, he feels a sting for a while, and then afterwards it finishes off. You say something very mean or something hurtful to some person, and every time that guy will remember that he feels that pain, oh, he said this to me type of thing. And more than that, for a person who is very, very alert in the spiritual life, one should not even think of harming somebody, hurt. That means, that fellow did something like, saying maybe, I should get punished. Or if somebody did that, you say, oh, he deserved it, all that type of thing. So one has to be very, very vigilant and sensitive not to throw out bombshells, thought bombs out there to the world because you're angry with somebody, you don't like somebody, or whatever reason, that energy, thought energies go out in this world and catches somebody's mind and walks through that. Just like good ideas, if you send out ideas thought out by wonderful, powerful saints and sages, you manage to catch them and they uplift you. Likewise, negative ideas, too much out there, also has the possibility of infecting the mind, especially a weak, vulnerable mind, and drag them down. So we can contribute to others' downfall unknowingly by tossing out these energies. See, thoughts are energies. Words are also energies. And of course, when you hit somebody, that's a physical energy. But these are negative energies that can do harm to us, others. So one has to be very, very vigilant in a spiritual life about using the energies that are there so that we don't do any harm to others, and as a result do harm to ourselves. And the result is that if you do this, we are then promoting our spiritual well-being. Tato yati param gatim. Such a person, therefore, attains the supreme goal, which is liberation. Liberation here means the actual experience of that universal consciousness, where the wave merges into the ocean. And then through that merger, identifies itself with all the waves, because now it's the ocean. That is the concept of mukti, liberation, in the of the Vedic teachers, and that is the goal of life. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram nahinaste atmanatmanam tato yati param gatim. So these two verses have been quoted a few times by Swami Vivekananda. He loved it because this is contains in itself the essence and the gist. The one behind the many, the focus is on the one behind the many, and how to apply it, and very, very practical. Okay, any questions or discussions on that? So each one of you should think after listening to all this, which is Shravan. The Vedanta method of spiritual practice is Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan. Shravan is listening. Listening again and again. Manan, you have to think about it deeply. what's the meaning? What is the teaching that Sri Krishna is trying to convey to me with the help of these verses? If he were there to me, maybe he will not speak in Sanskrit. He might tell me in English or Maori, whatever is there. But what would he tell me? What is the message? And so that is Manan. You get the essence of it. You don't need the words anymore. The message has come. The words can be dispensed with. So you try to extract that, the gist of it. And Nididhyasan, you meditate on that until that idea becomes assimilated into you. This assimilation of ideas is what really education is. Swami Vivekananda says, and he says, if you have assimilated 5 ideas, you have more education than somebody who has mugged up the whole library. What he means is that, and when you're reading our scriptures here, and right in the introduction to this, before we started this, chapter 13, I talked about Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive development, how we assimilate ideas. So now we are sort of coming towards the end of the chapter. Let me just take that back to, so that it does not become some intellectual study only. It means extracting the wisdom out of it and making it your own, so that it becomes part and parcel of our thought process and how we perceive the world and how we interact with the world and all that. If that is done, then all this study is useful. Otherwise, it's nice ideas that we can talk about, but we don't put into practice, then it's not, hasn't reached its desired goal. So it's like ideas are food for the mind. When we eat food, we chew them and break them into pieces. We put some enzymes like the saliva and all those things to break down them further into ultimate sugars and proteins and amino acids and vitamins. And it goes down into the small intestine where they are absorbed. The essentials are absorbed into the bloodstream. The non-essentials just pass down the alimentary canal. And then after absorption, you do something with them. You use them to construct, manufacture your own body tissue, muscles, bones, hair, whatever is there. Or you take them into a cell, into the mitochondria. And I remember studying Krebs cycle or something in biology in grade 12, where the sugars are burnt and energy is released and you do some useful work out of them. So if you've manufactured, increased your health, improved your health, or done some good activity out of that energy that came out of the food that you ate and digested and assimilated, and through the process of respiration, released it, then all that eating was of some good, had a good outcome. But if you just absorbed it and ate it and didn't digest it, vomited it out, or had a diarrhea of it, or you just stored it and carrying out such a large amount of fat in your body and never using it, then that is information, knowledge that we carry in our head, but they are never useful to us. So that last part is the assimilation part, they call it when we study in the biology. Here, assimilation of ideas are something that we have to do. That is Nididhyasan. Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan. And Nididhyasan means it will become part of your mind, your thinking, the glasses through which you see the world and how you interact and react with the world or respond with the world. Now, can you take these ideas out of there and embed it in your everyday life? If you have done, if you are doing it or can do it or mindful of doing it and trying to do it, that would be really applying the Vedanta in your everyday life. So each one has to think about it. A couple of ideas out of the Bhagavad Gita, whatever appeals to you most intensely and you think is possible to do. Not everything has to be put into practice. Not is possible for everyone to put all those things in practice, but wherever you are in your spiritual journey, pick a few ideas. Keep it in front of you all the time. It could be your wallpaper on the phone or the computer or some piece of something hanging on your desk, reminding you, this is what I'm going to practice. And don't change it too much, too often. Do it for a week, a month, until you're grounded in that idea. And you begin to feel feel strengthened by that, and you feel that poise and balance and non-reactiveness. It controls your how you are engaging with the world and everything without losing your balance and poise, because you are now anchored in that oneness, the center, and that center is the divine within us and at the heart of the whole universe. So we'll just touch the verse 29. Prakritev cha karmani kriyamanani sarvasha yap pashyati yathatmanam akartaram sapashyati. And he who sees actions being done in various ways by nature itself, and who sees the self as the non-agent, he sees. Again, yapashyati sapashyati. So in the second verse, first two words are the yapashyati and the last two words are sapashyati. So this is about trying to give us that spiritual glasses to wear and to see the world through this lens of spiritual knowledge. So there are two entities we talked about, Kshetra and Kshetrajna, right in the beginning. Kshetra is the field, Kshetrajna is the knower of the field. And later on we said that Kshetra is the Prakriti, Kshetrajna is the Purusha. And of the two we talked about, here in this verse he talks about all actions are done by nature, Prakriti. The word Prakriti is translated as nature here, or it is Trigunatmika, made of the three gunas, which are constantly mutating, combining and recombining in different ways, and that's what brings about all the changes in names and forms, right from a small insect or an atom to the whole macrocosm or the whole this universe. And behind that is the ocean, the consciousness, that is akartaram, non-agent. It's by its mere presence, Prakriti is doing all the work. He sits there, but in his absence, Prakriti cannot do any work, type of thing. Sri Ramakrishna gives the examples of a wedding ceremony in some village, So there's a marriage ceremony or something is there. They send out the invitations. The landlord of the house, he makes all the arrangements, and the mistress, the mother of the house, she is all very busy preparing for everything. On the day of the wedding, the boss of the house sits on a nice chair, and people come and he greets them and nods his hand, hello, come, welcome, please take seat. He's really inactive. While in the back of the house, the engine room, the mother of the house, she is running everywhere, extremely busy doing this and that, entertaining guests and everything. Every now and then she'll come and whisper something in his ears, asking some advice, and he nods his head, yeah, go ahead, and then she goes back to work, doing things. So Sri Ramakrishna says this is how the Supreme Being is. The analogy is there. The Purusha is that Supreme Being. By his mere presence, everything happens, while nature, Prakriti, made of the three gunas, is extremely active. And this body, the mind, the intellect, the ego, everything is within the realm of that nature, Shakti, or the Divine Mother. Therefore, we are in her jurisdiction. And we are only released when she is gracious to us and opens the doorway to liberation. That is the subject matter that we have been studying in so much detail beautifully in the Pratyabhijna Hridayam, which is also coming to close also. So I think we've almost covered this sutra also. Prakriti eva karmani. Eva means only, verily. Karmani, actions performed by speech, mind and body. Kriyamanani, being performed, sarvasha, in various ways, individually, by us and by all beings. So all actions are produced by nature. Ya pashyati yathatmanam, a person who has realized the highest truth, he sees, yatha means The Atmanam is the Akartaram. The Atmanam, the self, is the known agent, but its mere presence is necessary, sufficient for the activity to happen. The analogy given in the scriptures here is a magnet and iron filings. The magnet has got a magnetic field, but it's lying stationary. The iron filings, they don't have a life of their own, but by the movement of the magnetic field, the iron filings move around. Likewise, the Purusha is the sentient being, consciousness. Everything is insentient, they don't have a life of their own, but by the presence of the Purusha, they all seem to be functioning. Likewise, in the presence of Brahman, all of Shakti seems to be operating. This is a sort of a dualistic expression of the truth. All right, so I think we've covered this also. 3 nice verses. Ya pashyati sa pashyati, we talked about, they all contain the same idea. And it's about seeing the one behind the many, the immutable, the unchanging behind the changing things. Its effect is that we do not do any harm to others because I'm in all and all are in me. And here we differentiate the Atman as the non-doer, and all the actions are attributed to the nature who is constantly performing all these activities. Body, mind, speech, ego, all belong to the Kshetra. They are attributes, the actions are attributes of these mutations, combinations and changes that are happening in the Kshetra, but the Kshetrajna's presence is necessary to make it happen. So it is like just by his presence it happens, but the power still resides in them. Okay, and this would be the one. We'll take up the last 5 verses before we complete this chapter. In the meantime, you can give a little thought as to what should be the next chapter we should take up. Shall we take up Bhakti Yoga in chapter 12, or you should take up chapter 15, Purushottam Yoga? We'll discuss this and hopefully we'll have a consensus, and then we'll decide when you complete this chapter. Any questions out there? No, all have got it. Very nice. Let us then offer this to the divine. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tassat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.